Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas. Their ongoing study in Perichoresis by Twombly. We're going to finish up chapter 3. We're going to take a look at pages 68 to 88. It's our penultimate lesson. There's only one more lesson after this. Chapter 4 is very short. This will wrap up chapter 3 on Christology. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at the Hupostasis of the incarnate Logos. Human nature directed by the Logos. A nature can be given personal form by being in a Hupostasis. That Hupostasis is the eternal Logos in Christ. The human nature was assumed by the eternal Logos. Assuming a human nature through incarnation. There is one Hupostasis of the incarnation that unites the human and the divine natures. And that which mediates between Logos and the human nature is the nous mind, the mind. So there is a mediation of the nous mind. Christ's human nature dwells in the Logos through Hupostasis unity. This is why we posit the concept of an en hypostasia. En hypostasia. En, which means in hypostatic union, a unity without confusion. So en hypostasia, that which subsists in two natures and is one hypostatically. One personhood in hypostatic unification, an essence of existence that can include distinct natures within it. An essence of existence, a unification that can include distinctions within it. One hypostatic unification, two natures, a true divine and true human nature, unity without confusion. So we learned the concept en hypostasia, in hypostatic union. But even though the two natures in Christ, the human and the divine, are united without confusion, without they can interpenetrate, yet not confuse, not mix, they remain distinct. But there is communion between the two natures. And so block 2, we're going to look at the communion. We're going to look at the koinonia. That's the word for fellowship, but it's used by John of Damascus for communion. So he uses koinonia for the communion between the two natures. So we've looked at the one Hupostasis of the eternal Logos. Now we look at the koinonia fellowship or koinonia communion between the two natures in block 2. Logos as Hupostasis. The Logos is the Hupostasis of both natures. Each nature possesses its own penetrating power as a perichoresis. Each form is a koinonia communion with the other. They do communicate with each other. Mutual interpenetration of the two natures. Each nature preserves its own natural properties, while grounded in the eternal Logos. There's the presence of two wills in the incarnate Word. That is important from Maximus the Confessor, who we already studied. John of Damascus adopted his position as follows. Christ has two natures and two energias of operation, but one hypostasis essence. Therefore, in each form he acts in communion with the other nature. In each form he acts in communion. Koinonia, to act in communion between the two natures. It is union without confusion. However, there was in the Trinity an identity of operation. But what about identity of operation with Christology? Note 5. In the incarnation we have difference of wills. Dunamis, potentiality, is the faculty that drives volition. The prayer of agony in Gethsemane instructs us, says John of Damascus. Both the human and the divine Christ delivered himself over to death. The human will does acquiesce or give in to the intent of the divine will. The human will is given power to face and accept death in the prayer of agony in Gethsemane. So that's an illustration of that communion between the two natures. John of Damascus says the best illustration is the prayer of agony in Gethsemane of communication between the two natures, distinct natures yet in communication. So we learn basically that we're moving through a triad here to close out Christology of one hypostasis in block one hypostasis essence, and that is the eternal incarnate Logos. Two distinct natures in block 2 that are in a koinonia fellowship with each other. The human and the divine nature communicate with each other. The best illustration of that is the prayer of agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. That leads us to the block 3 and the conclusion of the equation. Hupostasis plus koinonia communion equals redemption, Christological redemption. We're talking about a far-reaching salvation. Christ's human will has real function. Christ's human will takes up all of the negativity in the Garden of Gethsemane, like the fear of torture and the fear of death, in order that it also would be sanctified and overcome in the passion and the resurrection. Therefore, we're looking at the soteriological rationale behind the hypostatic union. Christ, in his entirety, assumed humanity in its entirety, in order that humanity might be healed, to bring all of humanity and every aspect of humanity into the realm of redemption. That's why Christ had to have a true human nature, to bring every aspect of humanity into the realm of redemption. Block 3, note 3, the realm of redemption. Christ's suffering was experienced in the humanity of the Word. The Logos first entered the limitations of human experience. The human will exists in the hypostasis of the Logos. The hypostasis of the Logos. The capacity for willing is intrinsic to the human nature. Operation or energia is performed by the hypostasis of personhood, which actualizes the dunamis potentiality. It's a movement from dunamis potentiality to energia actuality. Each actualization reflects the nature of which it is derived. The range runs from pure thought to physical action. Posited thought is the first action. Then the self goes out of itself bodily in action. Then there is the return moment of refining the intellectual soul. There's your triad. Posited thought, bodily differentiation, return in intellectual soul. So for John of Damascus, it's all about congruence between the two natures. John of Damascus affirms the ultimate congruence of Christ's two natures through their mutual communication, their mutual koinonia fellowship. The two natures act in concert at all times because they are in koinonia fellowship at all times, both nested in the incarnate eternal Logos, which is the foundation of that communication. So we get to close out Christology, we get a beautiful 20 pages, 68 to 88, because we get a formula. One hypostasis plus two natures in koinonia fellowship was absolutely necessary for the far-reaching salvation and redemption of all of humanity. That is the Christological significance of hypostasis, the Christological significance of perichoresis. It becomes a very powerful close to chapter 3. And in block 1, go to note 4. We pick up the concept of en hypostasia, which means that the two natures subsist in the hypostatic union, en hypostasia. The two natures hypostatically exist in the one essential essence of the incarnate Logos. They are in hypostatic union. They are en hypostasia. So block 1, note 4 is critical there. Block 2, we have note 3. We've got the truth that John of Damascus adopted the position of Maximus the Confessor, which said that Christ has two natures and two energias of operation, but one hypostasis of the essence of the eternal Logos, and that each nature acts in communion with the other. There is fellowship between the two natures. That was adopted from Maximus. John of Damascus adopted that position from Maximus. And so that led us to block 2, note 5, the example that John of Damascus illustrates. Block 2, note 5, subpoint C, the prayer of agony in Gethsemane, instructs us. Both the human and divine Christ delivered himself over to death. The human will does acquiesce or give in to the intent of the divine will. The human will is given power to face and accept death, to face and accept the upcoming abandonment on the cross. I think it's better to say abandonment on the cross. That was the significance of the cross, the suffering of abandonment. And so block 1 and block 2 prepare us for the far-reaching salvation of block 3. How can there be a far-reaching salvation if Christ does not go into the far country of man's sin, the full extent of humanity? Bart called it he used the illustration of the prodigal son. Christ entered into the far country of man's sin. I've always loved that about Bart, taking up the prodigal son. But it's illustrated here, and it is certainly true that Christ had to have a genuine, true human nature to take on the far country of man's human predicament. All of it, every aspect of it. Fear, the fear and trembling of Gethsemane, the prayer of agony. Every aspect was taken up because Christ took on a complete, full human nature to fully take up the full extent of being human and the far country of man's sin. For the purpose of, in block 3, for the sole purpose of having a human will with a real function to bring to humanity and bring to the earth the far-reaching salvation of the living triune God. A far-reaching salvation that on the cross entered into the complete abandonment of God. The 3 hours of darkness, 12 noon to 3 p.m. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? The full, complete abandonment, which is separation from God, was taken up in the cross, taken up within the Godhead, taken up within Christ. So that in the resurrection, so that in the ascension to the right hand of the Father, separation from God has been overcome. That 3 hours of darkness has been overcome. That complete abandonment from 12 to 3 has been overcome. The statement, my God, why hast thou forsaken me, has been overcome by the resurrection, by the ascension. This is why when we look at the cross, when we look toward the cross, we see through the cross to the empty tomb. We see to the cross to the ascended Lord at the right hand of the Father, in lordship, in judgment, in rule over heaven and earth, over judgment over the living and the dead. This is the faith of our belief in a far-reaching salvation. We believe in a far-reaching salvation. Why? Because Christ took on full human identity so that we might experience and be blessed with the grace of a far reaching salvation. I do like Karl Barth there when he talks about really leaning on the prodigal son, that Christ entered into the far country of man's sin. Christ entered into the far country of man's sin to restore man with the Father. The prodigal son has a universal message for all of us. Karl Barth saw that, and I like that fact that he did speak of it that way. And it's all reaffirmed here in this lesson. So beautiful lesson by Twombly. Beautiful conclusion to chapter 3, to Christology. We only have one more lesson to go. It'll be chapter 4. It's fairly short, so it's going to be taken care of in one lesson. We're not going to split it. It's going to be one lesson for chapter 4, but it's going to wrap up the conclusion to Christology, a very, very powerful Christology from John of Damascus. And we're going to pick up next time in chapter 4.